my gosh, I'm nervous.
Hello everyone. I'm Abby from Abby's Bookish Life, and today on my buddy book chats, I have ALLIE HAINES, my beautiful friend, and we are going to be talking about UNTAMED by Glennon Doyle. And for those of you who don't know what this is about, this is a memoir style book, almost like a self-help book about Glennon Doyle's life. She is kind of known for her previous books where she wrote about being like a Christian mother and like being a good wife. And in this book, she talks about her experience where she falls in love with a woman and her whole life is turned upside down, and she's now married to a woman. And she talks about her life as she kind of transitions into that side of her life and making these huge changes, and how everyone in her life kind of adjusted with her and what happened there. Overall, it's a book about being a woman and life in general. ALLIE, what did you think about the book?
I love this book. It was recommended to me by a very good friend of mine we always lift each other up. We're kind of like female empowerment buddies. So whenever we come across work like this, we like to share it and kind of discuss. And UNTAMED will begin the process of freeing you from the taming society that we all come from. So I really do think that I learned so much from Glennon's story, and I loved her raw honesty. Like, she is just spilling her whole heart in this book, and it is so beautiful and emotional. It's kind of a roller coaster. You know, the way it reads is really unique. I don't know if you felt that.
I did.
But each chapter is just like a little story, a tidbit from her life, and doesn't necessarily follow a chronological story or of her life, but it's just these little pieces, nuggets of wisdom, or lessons that she's learned, or confessions, or whatever it might be. And so that was kind of kept it fresh as you're reading it. I don't know if you felt this way. Sometimes it was like a little bit repetitive for me.
I did, yeah. There were some times where it was like a lesson would come up and I'd be like, oh, we already talked about this.
Yeah.
There were times where she would talk about something again, but like a different viewpoint on it, which was interesting. But sometimes it was just kind of like the same lesson in a different story.
Right. And I was like, okay, we got it. But I think it's based on how important that subject might be to her.
Yeah.
But overall, like, I love this book. It hits on so many important things that, I want all women to know and be aware of, such as the constraints that society may put on you subconsciously that we don't really talk about or know about. So I just love bringing that to the surface and being like,
yeah,
read this, think about it, and be changed.
I think it's interesting that this book touches on like lifting other women up and like empowering women and being an empowered woman. And you and I were both recommended this book by other women. So it's like, yes,
I love that.
We're just like continuing this uplifting. So we're going to recommend the book to all of you women.
Everyone. Yes. Men included.
Yeah. Which I do. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there were lessons that were definitely, a lot of this book I felt was about being a mother. Mm-hmm. And so there were some things where I was like, you know what, that we are not mothers. So those lessons may not apply in terms of motherhood, but I still found them really interesting. And I thought that men would especially like connect with some of them. I thought it was really interesting. But yeah, this book, I loved this book too. And it talked about more than what I expected. Like, I thought the whole thing was going to be about, what you had mentioned kind of as the overarching topic, like becoming an empowered woman and lifting other women up. But it also talked about like mental health. It talked about sexuality, obviously, is a big part of the book. It talked about religion quite a bit, where, her and her wife have two very different like viewpoints on religion and grew up differently and had experiences that were different. It talked about family dynamics, not just in her own like immediate children and husband or ex-husband and wife, but also with her parents. And it overall, there were just so many things.
So many.
I feel like it could connect to literally anybody who is looking for something to like lift them up.
Yeah.
So if you have not read this book, you can stick around. This is one, because it's a memoir style, I feel like you could watch this and like listen to us talk about it and still read the book and enjoy it, because there aren't really any spoilers because it's a nonfiction book. But yeah, but if you're like, oh no, I don't want to know anything about it before going in, this is the point where you have to peace out, because we are going to talk about like everything about this book, what we thought, and we're going to give quotes and discuss some of the lessons. So bye everyone who wants to leave at this point. But if you're here, stick around and we will start talking about the book with some spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, you said woman, and all I was thinking was, this is not just any woman. This is Abby Wambach, who is very
correct.
Female soccer player. She's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So it's funny. You're like, she falls in love with a woman. Spoiler, I guess.
Spoiler alert. She falls in love with a woman, leaves her family.
Not just any woman, though.
But no, like a very famous woman. I had to keep reminding myself that this was not like a fan fiction. Like, this is real life. Because I would be like, yes, falling in love with Abby. I'm so into this. Like, I love this story for them. I love this journey. But no, it was real. It is real. It's happening. It's her true life.
Yeah, it's real. True story.
Okay, so let's just start at the tippity top, at the very beginning. This book opens with a chapter on this cheetah at the zoo, who I think many of us who have been to zoos have experienced this show that she's talking about, where a cheetah kind of like runs and follows a like stuffed animal, and it's a demonstration of how fast a cheetah can run. But the cheetah is in captivity, and as soon as the cheetah is done doing this one sprint, it just like chills out and kind of is, you know, a little bit dull. And for me, that first chapter where she's talking about like they tamed this cheetah that in the wild would be like out running and like destroying things and like taking things down, the zoo or society, if you're looking at the metaphor, has tamed women and metaphorically this cheetah into being this like tame, docile creature that just like does what it's told. And for me, I connected immediately in that first chapter. I don't know about you, but I was like, oh dang, I just feel so attacked. I feel like I am that cheetah. We are all that cheetah. How dare she attack us all like this?
I definitely agree. I was so happy she made that analogy, because I always feel that way at the zoo. Not like specifically about women and being tamed. Like, I hadn't made that jump. But I'm always like, this feels wrong. Like, something is wrong. And I understand zoos, if you're watching this, zoo people, like, they do good things, obviously, and raise awareness about different animals, but it's always felt like this is against nature, and this is, you know, not the way it's supposed to be. And she really drives that point home by being like, women, you're not meant to live this life that was laid out for you if that's not liberating. Like, you need to be wild and be yourself, and not, you know, run that same path that's been like the cheetah has this one little route, right? So there's a great metaphor there, obviously, and I definitely was hooked.
Yes, and she kind of goes into how there's a story about how when Abby asked Glennon's mom and dad if she could propose, like, of course, this is after she's left her family and they're like, you know, getting ready to pursue being together. officially, like through marriage. And she says, Glennon's mom says, this is the most alive that I've seen her since she was 10 years old. And that is just in general really, really sweet. But it also kind of like she delves into this idea of at 10, around the age of 10, once girls start turning into young women, there are these boxes and these cages that we are kind of given that say, as a woman, you have to be these things in order to fit into society, and you have to be quiet, and you have to be, you know, malleable to whatever somebody asks you to do. You have to be flexible. You have to be calm. You have to be in control of your emotions or you're considered crazy. And like kids, I mean, I work in a school with young kids, most kids under 10, and they're wild. They just like, they say what they think. They are open to new ideas. They come up with new ideas. They're not afraid of saying something that will upset you. They're just like, this is what I think and I'm allowed to think it. And so for me, reading about how, you know, once we hit the age of 10, we're like given put in all these boxes as women. It was very eye-opening and very interesting to read about for me.
Yeah, it's a devastating thought. I mean, you're happy for her that she's found her life again, her vitality, her freedom, but to think that she spent, what was it, like 30 years?
Right.
I don't know what it is, but yeah, 30 years being like dead inside, like that is horrifying. And I think, I mean, I'm sure you know some, I'm not going to name them, but there are women out there that I feel like are living that way and still in a cage because either they're afraid or they just don't know that there's another way to tap back into that childlike wonder and freedom and wildness.
She
and
just
it also made me think,
no, keep going.
It made me think, like when you were saying like 10, obviously that's like when young women have a period, sometimes it starts around that age. So I wonder like if she felt that way because of her sexuality, like did she know when she was 10 that she was gay? I don't know.
Right.
But I think that is a really key component in a women's taming. It's like be ashamed of your body, of your sexuality, you know, don't show it off. That's very much ingrained. You know, I remember being in middle school and it was like the dress code for a middle schooler. Like, don't bring attention to your shoulders. Don't wear spaghetti straps. Like,
don't dye your hair any like colors. Don't wear shorts that are too short. Yeah, it's those, but those are the things. Well, and even at 10, it's when you start to see like career differences. Like women go into nurturing careers and men go into like hardworking careers, and those are the boxes that you have to follow. And it's like, you know, when I see 8-year-olds that are 8-year-old girls who are like, I want to be a scientist, and I'm like, yes, be a scientist. But then you see them years later and they're like, oh, I don't want to be a scientist anymore. And it's like they lose that spark because maybe not anybody in their life, but just society in general is telling them like, that's not an option for you because you're a woman and you should want these other, like it's an option, but you should want those other things more.
And we should definitely say, I mean, while this book is written by a woman, kind of more for women, like I think that what you're describing absolutely applies to men. And like I love that she kind of talks about the toxic masculinity that's plaguing our country specifically. And like I think it definitely applies to men and women, that it's like, you know, you are going to do these things. And so where does that start, Abby? Like where how do we stop that? Like I think it starts with people like you who are around these kids saying like anything is possible. What do you want to be? What are you interested in? Not saying like, oh, you're a guy and you want to be a nurse, that's wrong, you know, like those gender roles on them.
Well, and she, like I said, this book is kind of like a parenting, like it's giving parenting guides. And so the chapter that I saw this, there are 2 chapters pretty close together. One where she talks about her girls, because she has, I think, 2 girls and a son.
I know what you're talking about. I love this chapter.
And so she talks about this in one of the chapters, she talks about her girls and how like she's, you know, trying to parent them so that they are empowered and they are continuing to like live vivaciously and live their full untamed life and not let society tell them that they should stop being bossy or like control themselves in any way. And then it goes to another chapter that's called Boys, and she talks about how she never felt like she needed to teach her son how to be sensitive or how to, you know, she talks about, oh, I consider myself a feminist, but all I did was try to show my daughters how to be. I didn't teach my son how to be. And so I think that that's an important part too, that a lot of times gets missed in like discussions on feminism, is like part of this change comes from us teaching boys to be emotional and to feel comfortable doing and saying how they feel. And she talks about how in the car with her son and his friends, she like makes them talk about their feelings and like how their days were, who's the like the kid, odd kid out at school, like have those conversations that aren't just about what girls are you talking to or what sports do you play or those things that boys are talking about.
I wonder if I remember which chapter it is, because I don't know where it is, but she, on that same vein, talking about her son's like shampoo bottles and deodorant and how it's like, man up, like get the grime off you with this, I don't even know. And then all the girl stuff is like pink and
it's like be smooth and silky soft.
Be hairless.
Right, be hairless.
Hairless, be perfectly soft, and then it's like rusty dirt.
It's like the scrub dirt on you. Honestly,
it's actually dirt that you're cleaning yourself with.
It's so frustrating, but I think the book did a really good job of like talking about those without that being the main point of the book. Maybe it is the main point, but without it being like super over in your face. I think she did a great job of talking both about her girls and like how she wants to make a change for them and her boy, her son, and the boys in his life.
For sure. I like that you said that feminism, I mean, I think true feminists know this, but it's misconstrued to mean just about women. Like it is, I think, at its core about equality and like figuring out a world where people are recognized for their differences but also celebrated, and they're not, you know, put into boxes, but it's just like,
one part of equality for women involves equality for men as well, like taking the boxes away for them that they are feeling like they have to live in. Of course, I'm not saying that all men are like stuck in these boxes and that that's the reason they are, you know, there are a lot of things that feminism focuses on that isn't that specifically, but it is important in making change that, you know, the young boys are included in that conversation and aren't just excluded because we're trying to make a difference for the girls. Okay. I spilled tea all over myself. I'm gonna ignore it. Thankfully, I had a napkin just sitting right here.
Good. I love that mug.
Thank you. I love it too. I got it at TJ Maxx. That's the place to shop when you want deals.
It's the best.
Okay. A quote that stood out to me, and I feel like it's one that also stands out to you, or would stand out to you if you read it, is in the chapter called Imagine. And it said, the vision we carry in our imagination about a truer, more beautiful world is like what keeps us going and what like is our inner voice. And I think that stood out to me as one of the most like true and beautiful things while I was reading it, where I was like, the thing that guides you should be the thing inside you that you think is like the truest and like most beautiful world. Like, what do you want to change in the world? What is the like essence of the world? And that makes sense that that would also be like the essence of you.
I love that.
I felt it so deep.
Even in this, just like what is this called? Flap.
Like the synopsis on the front flap.
The front flap.
Front flap.
She says, you know, there is a voice of longing inside each of us.
Yeah.
we strive so mightily to be good partners, daughters, mothers, employees, and friends. We hope all this striving will make us feel alive. Instead, it leaves us feeling weary, stuck, overwhelmed, and underwhelmed. We look at our lives and wonder, wasn't it all supposed to be more beautiful than this? And I think that hits on what you were saying. It's
Yeah,
like
for sure.
that inner voice saying, what is my most beautiful life? Like, how do I imagine that? And how do I live that life?
Yeah,
And it's that I feel like might be the core of this book.
I think so too. And I think that it is something that even after reading it, I'm like, wait, but what is the like thing? Like, what is the thing that spurs me forward? And it can be so hard even once you identify it. You might be like, oh, this is the like most beautiful essence of life, that this is why I'm living. But it can be so hard to like get your life to look that way. Like, clearly she made massive, huge life changes where she said, I want my life to look like this, and I'm gonna give up everything I currently have and sacrifice everything so that I can go after this, what I think is the truest and most beautiful life. But that is so intimidating. It's the
For
most,
sure.
it's so scary to be
Yeah.
like,
And I think you can get caught in this trap of like, oh my gosh, I'm not being free enough. I'm not being myself enough. And that is like the wrong way, I think, to interpret this book, even though I definitely get like that anxiety inducing of what am I supposed to change? Like if my
right.
life's so boring and like
Like
trapped.
if it doesn't match what I want, like
Mhm.
what should I be, like how do I make this massive change?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a daunting prospect. I mean, what she did was like you said, full
Mm-hmm.
upheaval. Um, but I think about just, I used to work at a bank and there was a lot of women there specifically who weren't happy, just kind of like found themselves in their current roles or in their jobs and they're just like waiting to retire. And that's like my biggest thing is like if you don't enjoy what you're spending the majority of your hours of your day doing, like that may be a good time. And I know that not everyone's in this position, but I think it's important that you imagine something better for yourself and then let yourself try to go for it. Um, so that's what I love about this too. It's like really eye opening, makes you ask those questions of like, am
Right.
I? And then I, quit my job at the bank and followed Glennon. No.
And then I changed my whole
And
life.
then I changed my life. You can too. No. But I just like that. I think we also need to like consistently be asking ourselves that question because like you said, it's not necessarily like one thing. Like our
Right.
lives are always changing. They're
Yeah.
always going to change. And like if your family grows or changes, like that's going to change what you imagine as your most beautiful life.
Right. Well, and then she also talks in the book about how other people's opinions and like especially our families specifically is what she talks about, kind of change the choices we make and what we see as like our ideal life without doing it that like deep dive. So clearly if you're like digging deep into yourself and doing some like self work, you'll find what you think is ideal.
Yeah.
But most of us are getting input from other people as well into like what an ideal life would look like. So where's that balance come in? Where, or is it possible to have a balance? Do we need to get rid of everyone else's opinions and only focus on ourselves? Like what, while I was reading the book, that's the part that I was like, I need to think on this. Cause I mean, clearly you and I are both married. So like there's another person that we are connected to
Oh,
that like
yeah. Yeah.
involves our choices.
Actually, I love that you asked that because before we started this, I was looking over it and one of the dog-eared, I'm sorry, I dog-ear my books, like everyone yells at me for that.
I do
But
it.
I did. And one of the moments that really stood out to me was when she was telling her therapist, like, I fell in love with this woman, I'm conflicted. Like, what do I do? Like, do I leave my husband and my children and break up their worlds? And, divorce is so awful. Or, do I stay in the marriage and kind of suffer? Right.
Yeah.
And the therapist, she says you should stay with your husband and your family and try to make it work because that's what's best for your kids.
Yeah.
And
And basically like makes her feel crazy. Her therapist is
yeah,
like, oh well,
but
you're just like holding on to the anger about your husband's infidelity and like you're not moving on.
yeah,
Like you're just
but
not trying.
she says like that therapist is a good therapist, like that's what would have been best in their eyes, like.
Yeah.
But the big takeaway from that was like, what are we teaching our children if we stop living who we truly are? Because then as mothers, we become martyrs
Yes.
for our children. And then our children grow up and they feel like they have to sacrifice all their happiness for their children, and on it goes. When
Mhm.
truly the best thing you can do for your kid, or so Glennon says, and I agree, is choose the best life for yourself. I mean, don't hurt anyone, but like, follow your best life, and
Yeah.
then you empower them to do the same, which is what mothers want for their kids anyways. It's
Right.
just crazy.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that there were so many times in the book where that specific message inspired me, especially as somebody who knows women who are moms who are like still going after their dreams and like doing what makes them happy. And as someone who has dreams and like knows that having a kid doesn't necessarily like slot right into like the dream that I have, it's like, yeah, that it's really stressful to think about like, oh my gosh, am I a bad mom if I don't give up my entire, my career and my passions to take care of this child? And that's kind of a very ancient, like
Yeah,
ingrained into us idea that you have a kid, you stay home, you, as the mom, are the provider for them at home, where you nurture them and you care for them and you're there for them 100% of the time.
it's actually not that ancient is the crazy thing.
Yes, it
It's
like
years
our
ago.
parents. Right.
I mean, literally, like my mom was, well, they both worked, but she was kind of like the breadwinner. Like she traveled all over the world, and that was like a very big deal in the neighborhood that I grew up in. It was like,
Yeah.
what? Your mom doesn't stay at home?
Right.
What? Even when I was growing up, like that, we're
Yeah.
like barely a generation removed from that way of thinking.
And a
And
lot of people still
now,
do feel that way.
oh,
It,
I
it's
know. And
not even a full removal.
we should say, if you want to stay at home and that's what you imagine as your most beautiful life,
Yes.
amazing, great. But if you want to work and you want to do these other things, and in this case, it wasn't even about really work. It was about choosing your life partner and
Right.
choosing love over your kids, I guess,
Yeah.
perception of your current marriage,
Right.
very complex,
Yes.
nonetheless. You
Yes.
should still
But yeah,
follow your
that
bliss.
empowerment of like being a mom or just being a woman in general who has aspirations, whether they are involved in career or like just a general passion or like romantic relationships, that's still something that's so societally is frowned upon. And women are allowed to be passionate. You're allowed to be passionate. You can be passionate about whatever you want. It could be a person, it could be passionate about staying at home and like being a stay-at-home mom. I know people whose passion that is, and I am so like that would be their dream. And
Right.
I hope that they can achieve it because that would be wonderful. But yeah, that part for me was very impactful too.
I wonder if you've thought about that under the lens. I think she talks about it and towards the end, is that like women are like fellow women are often the people that are perpetuating
Yes.
these beliefs. Like again, we're not mothers, but the idea of what is a good mother, and then that judgment that comes from other women. Because
Yes.
like she talks all about how women don't like other women who are free.
Right. Yes, I think I wrote the quote down. It says, "Why is it easier to like a woman or like a woman when she's struggling rather than thriving?" It's like we support when another woman is like, "Oh, I had such a hard day," or like, "Oh, the kids
Yeah.
like ran me ragged." You're like, I feel for you, I'm connected to you. But when a woman is like a boss woman and is like fully thriving,
Yeah.
we're intimidated. Like it becomes
Mhm.
a thing where you're like, oh, I don't, you put your shackles up. You're like, oh no.
I
Which,
love, so off that, she says in comfort zones, we become people who say of confident women, I don't know, I can't explain it. It's just something about her. I just don't like her. I can't put my finger on why. She says, I can put my finger on why. It's because our training is kicking in through our subconscious. Strong, happy, confident girls and women are breaking our culture's implicit rule that girls should be self-doubting, reserved, timid, and apologetic. Girls who are bold enough to break those rules irk us. Their brazen defiance and refusal to follow directions make us want to put them back into their cage.
honestly, that sums it all up.
Moment of silence. I did. I dogged that because I was like, oh, like I'm guilty of doing this to other women. Women
Yeah.
have done it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, how do we stop this cycle of insanity? Like, don't we feel much better when we lift each other up and compliment each other for being bold and confident? It just doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
Well, and I think books like this and like talking about it is the first step, because when I read it, I have absolutely said, I don't know why I don't like her. I just don't like her. About like other powerful women. Like I'm fully guilty of this. And I never like could circle around. I never could put my finger on why. And like reading this was very eye-opening, where I felt like, wait, okay, now I can name it. And once you can name what is going on in your head, it's so much easier to fight those like subconscious thoughts that are coming through. Because now that I know that that's what I'm thinking, I can talk myself away from those thoughts rather than just like letting them linger and being like, well, I don't know, but I'm just going to think it anyway.
For sure. And that is definitely the power of this book, is like putting into words those subconscious societal, I don't know what to call them, tendrils in your life.
Yeah.
And naming like, this is what's happening here and it's not correct. And we can change it just by knowing that it's there and then adjusting, as needed. Right. But I also love because a lot of women I know do this, like apologize for everything they say. And it's a really bad habit. And I want everyone to stop doing it immediately. Because
I'm also guilty of
sorry. That. Like, stop. You're not sorry. So why are you saying it?
Right.
Because you're like,
well, and you shouldn't. She also talks about you don't need to say sorry because something you said and meant hurt somebody's feelings necessarily. Like, obviously, if you say something that's hurtful, like genuinely,
what you're saying, yeah,
like you can apologize for that. But like, if you are a powerful woman and somebody tries to call you on it, you don't need to be sorry for being successful or being powerful. It's not necessary.
Yeah, and
I feel like most of the things I apologize for are not necessary to apologize for.
Right. You're not alone. You're not alone. It's like you're not sorry for it, but it comes out as like a softening of the blow of your honesty, of your truth.
Yeah.
And like you have to start saying like, thank you for telling me how you feel and giving me your truth and not being apologetic about it, because I want to know who you are and what you're thinking. And that's why we're having this conversation. This is why we have this partnership or relationship, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about the difference between humility and what's the word I'm thinking of? Like bragging. What's the word? I don't know. She talks about the difference between being prideful,
Yeah.
Versus modesty is what she used.
Modesty.
So she's like, you can be humble, but you don't have to be modest.
Yeah.
And I think women especially are like, be modest. Like that's like the subconscious theme behind you.
Oh, it feels impossible to accept a compliment.
Right.
It's like, oh, I can't accept that I was good at this thing, or that like this thing I did was like a positive thing. Like I feel like as a woman, me personally, and she talks about in this, women in general feel like they have to downplay anything good in order to like fit in this box. Yeah, you have to make yourself small. It's
Oh,
so,
yes.
it's,
So true.
yeah. It's, I think knowing about it and like reading things like this and like absorbing that information, it's the first step to like catching yourself on it and saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to learn to say thank you when somebody compliments me and not be like, oh no, don't.
Disgusting. Like, I literally hear people say that. No. I'm like, so gross, or whatever comment it is to like,
Yeah, it's like the
downplay.
opposite. Yeah. Or like if you spend a lot of like I've spent a lot of time on like work stuff, like
Mhm.
presentations, and someone
Yeah.
would be like, "That was a great presentation," and I'd be like, "Oh no, it would like it didn't take me any time at all. Like it was just thrown together." And it's like, no, I spent a hard work on that like presentation.
Mhm.
Why can't I just say thank you?
I don't know. Because we're tamed. We're all tamed to
I know,
behave
and
these ways. And I love what you brought up about how, like, when girls sit and talk, it's like listing everything that's wrong with your life. Like,
like
everything
this
that's
is not
negative.
like an anti-therapy. Like if you need to talk about your life with your friends, please do. Like if something is wrong,
Sure.
it is okay to talk about it.
True.
But like people, you're not, most women are not doing it to genuinely talk about their problems. They're doing it to be like, make yourself more likable.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't have to, like, as someone who's close friends with like mostly every woman in my life is a powerful woman and like owns it.
Same.
That
That's
is
what I
like,
love.
it can be hard to not like try to make yourself small and like try to fit into like, oh, I'm gonna be little and quiet so that I don't cause any waves. And it's like that's not necessary.
I agree.
Thank you, Glennon Doyle, for telling
Thank
us it's not
you.
necessary.
I know. I do feel like this book in itself is therapy for,
Oh,
obviously, her for writing it. She had to like go through a lot.
yes.
For us to be like, wow, this was like a thing that I was doing, and this is an issue that I've been feeling for
Mm-hmm.
my whole life, and
Yeah.
I've never been able to name that. I've never been able to digest how
Yeah.
it feels. So
And
it's
she
really
also like she gives verbiage to use when having these discussions with people. Like you and I have talked about previously the chapter about islands
mm,
and how like Glennon Doyle has to like say to her family like I'm putting myself on an island and you can't come on here until you're ready to come without like bringing fear or bringing something like that. And like those are conversations that I've had to have and or that I felt like I needed to have with people and I didn't know how to do it. And so reading this book was helpful because I could see her have these conversations with people in her life and I can take it and apply it as needed to my life. And that's just one example. It happens everywhere in the book.
yeah, I don't know if we want to go into this, but I love the idea of like touch trees. That's a big one in hers.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I feel like she does a really good job of like grounding the book in these like really actionable items that
Yes.
it's like, you could try this, and or you could implement this in your life and
Yeah.
just see how it changes how you communicate with others,
Right.
how you feel just from your own mental health perspective. And so I like that too, that it's, you're right, it's like a little bit self-help, a little bit memoir.
Yeah. And she talks about the process of finding your knowing, which is like your gut reaction or your gut feeling, like what you know should be done in a situation. And so for her, she uses a type of meditation to find it. It's basically like sitting in silence and like sitting in your feelings, like acknowledging that your feelings are happening and like sitting in them. And so that was really interesting. It's something that I would love to try. It gives me an actionable thing to say, I can try this to accomplish this. Like, this is why I would be doing that. It's just those parts of it, those like self-helpy parts are like very meaningful when I was reading it.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the knowing. I liked that she kind of envisions God as like your knowing, which was an interesting way for me to hear about her kind of Christianity, her
Yeah.
journey with Christianity. It's kind of like a lot of people think of God as an external force.
Mm-hmm.
So she brings it inward and says like, it's actually our intuition connected with the universe, which is a little bit closer to what I believe. I'm not a Christian, but I'm spiritual. And so that was like a cool way of looking at religion.
Yeah.
I did have some people that didn't like the meditation stuff. Like they just thought it wasn't doable.
Yeah.
So I wonder, have you ever done meditation before?
I have tried it. I've actually been looking into it more because like I have anxiety for anybody who doesn't know. And so my brain doesn't like to sit in silence. Like the moment there's silence, my brain will like kick into overdrive and try to fill it with thoughts and activity.
Uh-huh.
And so I always was of the thought that meditation wouldn't work for me because I can't shut my brain down. It doesn't work like that. And I've been doing a whole lot of research into it because a lot of research shows that like that will be your immediate reaction. But if you work at it long enough or you sit there long enough, eventually it will stop. Like eventually your brain will have to realize that like you're not going anywhere. Like you're gonna sit in it. And so I do okay with guided meditations. Those ones work for me because I have something to listen to.
Yeah.
So my brain is, I'm not just sitting in silence.
Yeah. I think it's tough.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I'm like a list maker, planner. So I love to like, if I'm sitting down, I'm like, I have a list and I could be doing 100 things on that list right now.
Yes.
So why am I sitting here for even if it's 15 minutes, like I'm like, hurry up,
right.
Get it over with. And so it's just such a struggle. So I was talking to some other friends about that and they're just like, I can't do it. So I just thought it was interesting. Like, does that play into part of that societal problem of this pressure of women to like do it all, literally do everything and do it well, do it perfectly, not just well.
There's a pressure to meditate perfectly. Like you have to, like you can't just sit there and like do it your own way. You have to do it perfectly.
That's so true, which is hilarious because it's like just for you. Nobody else cares, but you were like,
goodness gracious. Well, so the last point that I want to talk about is real quick. It's a nice, uplifting, positive end.
It gets dark, but
so we're gonna talk about the first time that Glennon sees Abby. She has the thought, there she is. And she describes it almost like a love at first sight, like an immediate knowing where she knew. And I feel like you and I both have had very similar experiences with the people that we married. And so I would love to hear, what did you think when you read that? Was it, I know some people have read this book and thought like they don't believe in love at first sight. They think it's absurd. Well, hold on a second. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay. We were talking about what you thought when you read it. Some people were very like love at first sight is not real. That connection is like not, like maybe it was lust that she felt, but like she didn't know that was like her person. So what were your thoughts when you read that section of the book?
Oh, I mean, I guess I do believe in love at first sight, but not in like the cheesy version that we're kind of taught is what it means. Like, I think that you can meet someone and there's a lot of different types of love. And you can have that like connection with someone on a deeper level than just like, oh, hey, I met you. You know, like,
oh yeah.
For me, I mean, I didn't know when I met Andrew, my husband, that I was going to marry him per se.
Right.
But as soon as I met him, like there definitely was like a feeling that was like, I not just am attracted to this person, but like their essence and who they are is like pulling me in almost like I don't know, holy, something pulling me in like magnetically, whatever it might be. It's just that feeling of like, wait a minute. Some could say lightning. I don't know if that sounds painful.
Yeah, well, I had a similar experience when I met Brent for the first time where I thought, you know, I 17 at the time. So I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to marry him.
Right.
But it wasn't even like an attraction either. It was kind of like,
Right, Brent.
I mean, obviously I think he's attractive, but it wasn't like, some people say like, oh, people who think it's love at first sight are just like physically attracted to them. But for me, it was just like, I felt like it was like a knowing. Like I felt very similar to how she described it, where I saw him and I was like, there he is. Like, that's it. Like, I'm going to know him and like, we're going to connect. I can feel it. And
Yeah.
I proceeded to not speak to him for like 3 months after that. Why? Because I was 17.
Oh no. Yeah. I mean, I think that I've had that happen with a few people, and it wasn't the same with each person. It's always kind of different.
Yeah.
But I do believe in it as a feeling of love, or a feeling of knowing, and a warm feeling. Like, I don't know
I think
exactly to describe it.
that experience for me is the closest to knowing, like her description of knowing that I think I've gotten, where it's like that immediate, like, what the choice is, like, something, even if you don't know what it is that you're like, wait, I know.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's
Yeah.
really special. To
Yeah.
have like a pure knowing moment, which can be really hard.
I know. I've had other moments in life that I'm like, I have a gut reaction to something or a gut feeling, but I think that when you experience a like true, like down deep knowing, it is like, it's great.
It's so great.
It's great.
I didn't know. I mean, it might have been that, but I didn't have the words then to.
Yeah. Again, things this book gives you, the words. It gives you the words.
She gives you the knowing, or the lessons to start to trust.
Yep.
Your own knowing.
Yes. Well, I think
Did we do okay?
that we did a great job talking about the important parts of this book. I think you all should read it. You can get a ton out of it, and it is very, like we said, eye-opening. I'm sure if you've watched this far that you've probably already read it and you're like interested to hear what we hear. So like, please comment down below what you thought about it, what parts stood out to you, so that we can chat about it all together. Thank you, Allie, for joining me today.
Bookish Life. I'm so glad I got to talk to you today about this book. I hope we can talk about other books in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thank you all for joining us, and I will see you all next time. Bye, friends.